Hello, welcome everybody to our second episode of From the Stump. Today my name's Trev from Norwood Sawmills. Today we're going to be talking with one of our favorite people that does the Sawmill School TV, Dave Boyt. A wealth of knowledge, so I hope everybody enjoys what he has to say. And I see we're just getting ready to cue him up here. Dave, are you there?
Hello? Yeah.
Dave, good to see you, sir.
Good to be seen.
Thank you for joining us on our second episode of From the Stump, where we're going to talk about sawmills and sawmill TV and cutting and everything related to cutting with a sawmill.
All right.
I figured you would be an excellent individual to get on here right away and pick your brain on a lot of topics that I know I get asked about quite frequently. And I'm sure a lot of guys would like to ask you, but maybe don't get the chance. So,
Very good.
So let me just introduce you, because I don't think, lots of people see you on the videos and get your instruction and appreciate everything you do, but I don't think they understand where a lot of that background comes from. So I'm just going to read through here some of the information you provided to me. And a lot of this is new for me, even though we've had so many conversations. This explains why there's so much information locked away in the back of that brain of yours. So everybody, this gentleman has degrees in forestry management, wood technology, industrial technology education. He taught industrial arts for a long time. He's a certified master logger. He's the managing editor for Sawmill and Woodlot magazine, and he's the president of the Missouri chapter of the Walnut Council. So if anybody's looking for someone with some background, I think we found the right guy.
Still working on it.
Still working. Well, you know what? I think that that's an awesome dude. I think once you quit, then stuff starts to slow down, and I don't ever see you doing that, sir. You seem to be a pretty busy guy and always got something on the go or some other project or some other idea that you're thinking about.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Dave, and I think a lot of guys, would like to know this information. And how did you get started on the sawmill journey? Like, when did you decide this is a tool I like? Like, was it in your childhood? Like, where did that come about?
Well, my first real experience with sawmilling was when I was married and was building a house on some property out in the woods. And basically what I would do would be to cut down some trees, haul the logs to a local sawmill and get it sawed up to post and beams for the house, and work at the mill, help saw them up and bring them back and put them up. Then I'd cut more trees and get them sawn, and I spent about a year doing that, building the house. So that was back in the late 70s, early 80s. So old circle sawmill, this was before band saws had really come onto their own, like we know them now.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. I enjoy working with the wood and working with the equipment, and also with the chainsaw work and the forestry work. It seemed like a really natural way to go to kind of extend out on that too.
Just kind of seemed like your path, like you kind of found that direction that you wanted to go in.
Let me work outside, and I always enjoy that. So.
Definitely. So you've been at it for a while. So when you built that place, was it stick frame, or did you go for square log construction or anything like that, or was it all just 2x6, 2x4?
It's post and beam, so
all right.
It's actually neither. But basically, I've got there's not a load bearing wall in the entire house, and that let me build the framework of the house and then come in and determine where to put the different rooms and how to arrange things. So yeah. And it's also passive solar for heat. So we just have a little bit of wood heat for backup. And of course, we're in Southwest Missouri is where I'm located now. And so keeping cool in the summer is probably as much of a task as staying warm in the winter here.
maybe more so than staying warm in the winter. Like I've been down there with you at that couple.
Oh yeah.
That last one we attended, man, that was some serious heat that was in that field that day.
Oh yeah.
You know, when I went back to the truck, I think it was up near 100 or a little better than that, and that was outside. That wasn't in the cab, so it was hot. It was hot. It's hot, especially for this chubby duck here. So.
Well.
Now I know you and I were talking a little bit yesterday, and I wanted to quiz you on this. What are some of your favorite types of wood to cut down there where you are in? Why do you enjoy working with those certain species? I'm sure a lot of guys will want to hear what you got to say on that.
Well, my favorite species is whatever's on the mill. I enjoy working with the oddball stuff. You know, everybody's got oak. Walnut's nice because I can always sell walnut without any problem as far as the lumber goes, and it cuts real easily for the most part. But I've cut sassafras. I think one of my favorites is sycamore, which people kind of raise an eyebrow and say, you know, why? That's just pallet lumber. Well,
yeah.
The woodworkers know of a kind of wood. It's called laced wood, but there's no such thing as a laced wood tree. What laced wood is actually is quarter-sawn sycamore, and I can get sycamore logs up to 4 foot diameter, you know, and 10, 16 feet long, and that you get that, you quarter saw it, and you really got something. So right. I like that. And there's another wood called hedge, also known as Osage orange or bodark.
I hear a lot of people talk to me about hedge. I've never had any experience with it.
Very hard, dense wood. In fact, it's the hardest, densest wood that grows in the U.S. When you cut it, it's almost like gold in color, and it kind of fades out to a tan, very smooth grain. Hard to work with, but you can make some beautiful things out of it. And it was a traditional wood for the bows that the Indians in this area, Native Americans, used for their bows.
Right on. That's interesting. I appreciate learning that. Now, when you're cutting that, you said you're quarter sawing that stuff as well, or is that just, how are you cutting that? Are you just flat sawing it, or you're the grade, or what do you do normally? Well,
with the hedge, you very seldom get a log big enough to quarter saw. Typically it's a very, not straight. It's hard to get something even good enough for a fence post. So
it's a crooked growing thing.
It is, and that's one of the things, and we'll probably get to this more in a bit, that works real well with the type of mill that I'm running, which is the Norwood HD 36. Is it's real flexible in the clamping system, so I'm able to take the oddball stuff, either slab it out or get it on the mill and cut it. Whereas other types of mills that are more fixed and rigid, they're great as long as you got something long and straight and round, but they don't do well with the oddball stuff. So
no, and you bring up a good point there, Dave. I talked to so many guys recently. I think with what's going on, more people have been reinvesting in their machines and looking to upgrade them or make some of these changes like we're talking about. And so many guys, they're like, yeah, I've got this 4 foot piece or this 5 foot piece.
Yeah.
And what's going to make this easier for me? And that's the beauty with the HD is you can add that bunk and,
right.
and add those brackets, and then you can play with all that little stuff right up at the saw head, right?
Well, and that gives you a niche, and that's kind of, a little bit of background. I started out cutting railroad ties. My first mill was actually a timber harvester. They're out of business now. They were built up in New York State, full of hydraulics. I mean, it was a good sized mill.
Yeah.
And I was trying to cut railroad ties, and one thing I learned before too long was that if you don't have the support equipment to handle that type of stuff, you're gonna go, starve to death while you're breaking your back. So almost. So I moved away from that, sold that mill, and that's when I got to Norwood and got into some of the niche markets for wide slabs and things for woodworkers that they can't get from anyone else. I mean, you want sassafras, mulberry, I can, or persimmon, if I don't have it, I can get it. Or if you have it, no matter just about anything you got, I can cut it.
Right. That's amazing. So now, is that just relationships that you've made with some local people, or do you have that all on your own plot or land?
Good question. I started out just working off our own place. We have a family tree farm actually here in Southwest Missouri, and I live kind of on the edge of that. But in the last maybe 3 years, I started working with tree trimming services, arborists, that type of thing. And now they're calling me up and say, hey, I've got this sweet gum log. It's 30 inches in diameter and 16 feet long out of a yard. Do you want it?
Yeah.
Yep, I'll get it.
You'll take it. Which brings me to another question, and I'm going to go in a little ahead of when I thought I was going to, just because we're on topic about it. How often do you clip something in one of those logs that has come out of a front yard? And when you do, along all of these years, what are some of the craziest things you've dug out of a tree while you've been cutting?
Yeah, there's a lot of hardware in those logs, that's for sure. And it's I guess that's what you're referring to, I assume.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do. Yeah.
But I think the strangest thing, it was a log that a fellow brought to me to cut. And a lot of times people they'll bring a log over to my place. I'll slice it up while they're there. Then they can load up the boards and go home and just make one trip of it. So he brings a couple of logs, oak, out of his kind of back out from his woods. And I hit something, and I mean, I've hit nails and I've hit wires. Around here, a lot of the farmers, the old timers, that's their idea of a fence post, is any living tree that they can staple a piece of barbed wire to, that's your fence post.
Yeah.
But so I run into that more than you'd think. But I mean, this just brought the mill to a halt. Pulled the blade, backed it out of the cut, and it was all mangled up. That's not a nail or a staple.
No.
And I just set that log aside and put on a fresh blade. That's one of the great things about the bandsaw mills. You can, you're out maybe $20 if you have to replace the blade. It's not it won't break the bank on you. And while I was getting the next log set up, he took a chainsaw and he was going to find out what it was.
Yeah.
It was an axe. What?
I would have dug into that too. I would have had to know what got run into that guy as well. So. Yeah,
well, that's what was so interesting. It was an axe head.
An axe head.
And he looked at me and he says, I wondered where I'd left that. And probably 20 years ago, he leaned that axe against a tree, couldn't find it. And I found it for him. So there's that. And also in 2011, there was a massive tornado that came through Joplin, Missouri. And I'm about 18 miles south of Joplin.
Yeah.
And worked some on, getting logs off houses and helped with the cleanup. And brought one log home. This was out of a residential area in Joplin, full of bullets. I mean, I bet I saw. Of course, they were lead, so it didn't hurt the blade any. But I couldn't figure that out. Joplin used to be, still is in places, kind of a rough town. But
well, that tells you right there. I mean, there's no question of the lead in a tree. Someone was shooting at it.
Well, Bonnie and Clyde had a famous shootout there, and I always wondered if maybe this was from that. Makes a good story anyway.
It does, And I ran into this is a couple years ago now. We've got some logs. We were down at the Sunbelt Ag Expo in Moultrie, and We had a fella bring us a bunch of different stuff that we were cutting, and I cut through something, and I heard, it makes the strain when you hit lead. It's different than hitting a nail.
Yeah.
It makes a different sound, and you kind of get to know it after you've hit a few of them, right? And we got done, and I was looking at this, and I knew it was a piece of lead, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me what it was. And then another fella come walking by, a few years on me, and he dug it out of what the board. It was magical. I cut it right in half, so the board I took off literally had half of it in it, and he dug it out, and it was a musket ball.
Wow.
I was so impressed. I was like, this is a piece of history.
Yeah.
I've just come across here, and yeah, I'll never forget that. But it was pretty neat. I mean, to think how long that's been just sitting still, waiting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the other thing is that if you got metal, and I've cut logs where you can see, they'll say, no, there's no wire in it, and you'll see a piece hanging out the side. So, well, what's that? How'd that get there?
Oh, that's a piece of wire.
Yeah. Wire.
That'll do a
fence wire.
Yeah.
And the cobalt blade or the bimetal blades that are available, I think Norwood carries them.
Yeah, we still have bimetals. Yeah.
Good. They will cut through that. And I've cut through, it was a piece of walnut, and I just kept cutting through the wire, staples, everything. And it just looked like it's got metal inlay in it. Now, you run it through a planer, that's going to be another story. But as far as the sawmill is concerned, those blades will handle the wire, and they'll keep on going.
They will, and I get a lot of feedback from guys both ways. I always recommend guys that are cutting reclaimed barn beams or basically any reclaimed, that's the right blade for them for sure.
Right.
And then anything like what we're talking about right now, if it's coming out of a fence row or it's within 20 feet of a house, it's going to have something in it somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
There's just, you kind of have to accept that. But some of the prettiest boards I've seen ever are these trees that get these pieces of iron or steel or whatever stuck. They make the neatest, because it bleeds off into the grains, and it makes the coolest patterns.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're going to do in a blade, maybe two, but what you're going to get out of it most of the time, I think, is probably worth it.
Yeah, one place where it's not, and then we can move on, is where out of a yard, a lot of times to keep a tree growing straight, they'll tie it to a steel post, to hold it straight. And then the tree grows around that steel post. Now that's something to cut into. You hit it when you hit a steel post.
Yeah, when you hit a steel post. You also know I ran into one of those power pole insulators one time. Somebody sat in the crotch of a tree, and I'll tell you, I hear a crazy sound because it's a ceramic kind of glass type thing, and that stops you pretty quick too.
I'm afraid even a cobalt blade won't help you there.
No, nothing will help you there. So I wanted to ask you, back to kind of figuring out where your story came from and where you got to where you're at with cutting and your knowledge and stuff. What led you down the road to create a Sawmill School series? Like, when did that kind of come into your mind? How did that all kind of come about?
I think, it mostly came about because I've got such a good relationship with Norwood. It's just you buy that sawmill, and all of a sudden, you've got this support structure and friends that you never knew you had. A lot of it came, from my participation on the Norwood Connect, the forum, from the website. And, there's a few of us that get on there and we'll swap stories, or somebody new comes on and, they'll talk, maybe they're having trouble getting a straight cut or whatever. And we'll kind of kick around some ideas, things for them to look at. So I think it kind of went from there.
I think we've kind of dropped off, Dave, like with all the new technology that's around and all the Facebook and the YouTube and all of that stuff, I don't really think that we're promoting that as much as we could, because that is such a good resource, and that's why I kind of want to touch on that for a second. That
Sure.
when you own a Norwood sawmill, and you get into that forum and you kind of get a rapport with the guys and you get to know who's who and all of that, the wealth of knowledge that's in there is astronomical compared to anywhere else you might go. Like if you ask a question, you could have 100 years of cumulative knowledge working on it for you.
Yeah, and just in two guys.
Hey, I'm not trying.
You're most of the way there with me.
Give it to me on that bio we sent you, but I'm not sharing that, not unless you do. Yeah, well, that's good to know. So, did you find a need? I mean, you already knew how to cut. You've had other sawmills before you got the Norwood, but did you find or feel that there was a need for that information to get out there when you got yours? Did you kind of go, hey, I'm wondering this. I bet you lots of other guys are wondering that as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, even now, I'll come up with something that'll puzzle me, or I'll come up with a solution to something that maybe other people have run into. I mean, I'll ask as many questions as I have answers for. It seems like even still, and
yeah,
and sometimes somebody that's new, but they've hit it and figured it out before I have. So there's always that.
It took me a little while in the beginning when I first started cutting. Like, you get to this point where you think, "Oh, I'm good. I got this all figured out." And then as you're going, and things start changing, and maybe you get into a different species of wood, and all of a sudden, it's just not working the way it did. What you were cutting previously,
right?
And you start to go, "Okay, maybe I don't have this all figured out. It's not as simple as just drop it on there, clamp it, and cut it."
Right.
Different blade pitches, different feed rates, all this starts to kind of float around and bubble up in your mind, right? So, yeah, I can understand the thoughts, I think, still from when I was starting and learning. And then I've come to realize that you're never going to be able to figure it all out. And so much of it is learned by doing, where you just kind of got to get it on there and get to it and make those mistakes. And, which brings me to something you wrote, and it kind of sat with me. Just give me a second here while I find it. Yeah, you wrote here. You wrote, "Good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment."
That's true.
That is some of the best words I've heard in a long, long time, buddy. I'm gonna file that one away because it's so true. So true.
As long as you don't get yourself hurt, and there's a point where good judgment and common sense has to kind of intersect a little bit too. I mean, everybody's going to get a few bumps and bruises. I think the worst I've had has been a dislocated thumb, but you generally can recover from it and keep going if you don't get too careless with things.
Yeah, exactly. There's always an element of caution that has to be exercised so that you're working with a 20 plus horse saw. So,
right.
The danger is always there. But, I've made my share of mistakes, and as long as you're taking the proper precautions, you might damage a piece on the mill or bend something.
Right.
You might, a cut or a bruise, but that seems to be the extent of it for most guys, I think.
One question that I haven't been asked is what I think the most dangerous part about running the sawmill is.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that.
And of course, mine's portable. I generally use it here on site, but I can take it. In fact, I took it all the way to Jacksonville, Florida for a tree farming conference down there years ago. But to me, the most dangerous part about operating a portable sawmill is the portable part. In other words, just being on the road. And it's no more dangerous than any other trailer. But when you figure, all these other idiots on the road that, when you're running the mill, you got control over everything. When you're out on the road, you've got a closing speed of, over 150 miles an hour. And, there may be within, 2 feet of you or some idiot trying to pass you or whatever. So that, to me, is the most dangerous thing involved with running a portable sawmill is just having it on the road.
It's true, and I've got my share of miles on with one of them behind me as
Yeah,
well.
I'm
And
sure.
yeah, you gotta pay attention when you got one of them behind you. And it's, going down the road, because it's one of those things that not everybody sees every day.
Well, that's true.
People that want to rubberneck and pull up beside you and gawk at it, and you kind of wonder, they're sitting right there in your blind spot because they're staring at what you're towing.
Could be, yeah.
Which is great, but it makes you a little uneasy when you're towing. So, I like sharing information. Just sometimes you got to really, really be watching. I wanted to kind of go off in a different area here because I want to pick your brain while I got you, because I'm as interested, I think, as anybody else on this topic. I want to talk to you a little bit and get your advice for, and I know this is a huge topic, and we touched on it a bit when we did that pre-interview, but drying, when you first are cutting and you're drying, and let's talk about this from a new owner's perspective. So let's say the guy just got his sawmill. He's made his first, he's cut his, let's say 2,000 board feet. He's cut his first 2,000 board feet. And now he's got to think about, okay, I got to sticker this stuff. I got to put it somewhere. I know I'm not going to use it right away. What advice do you have for that guy?
Well, the advice is to have a plan and be set up. In fact, I did a video on cutting stickers and blocking for stacking wood. And, you might cut a few boards just, because you want to see what they're going to look like. But when you start cutting on a more serious basis, the first thing is to take some of your trashiest wood and cut maybe some 4x4s for blocking to get it up off the ground, and then some maybe 1 inch square, or anywhere between 3/4 inch and 1 inch square stickers, which are spacers that go between the layers of wood for air circulation. Because if you don't do that, you're just cutting firewood. And it may be even too rotten for that in a few years, depending on the species. So you got to have a plan and know what you're going to do with it. But one thing that a lot of people miss is that the wood starts drying as soon as you cut down the tree. And it's especially if you're working with walnut, cherry, something that's got some value to it, that you can. So a lot of people use latex paint to coat the ends of the logs. There's a material called anchor seal, which I buy, and it's a wax coating that you can put on the ends, because that's where it's going to dry first, even in the log form, and that's where you get your cracks on the ends. And you say, well, yeah, you just trim those off. Okay, but you're going to lose maybe 5-10% of your lumber just trimming off the ends. Why throw that away? So that's where the drying begins, is as soon as that tree hits the ground, basically, when you cut it.
Yeah.
But
I learned that. I took a grading course there a while back, and it was really clear, especially when it comes to oak.
Yeah.
There's a very limited amount of time when it comes off the stump to when it gets cut, and it actually starts losing grade. I think they have that down to the day, don't they, Dave?
Yeah. That's good. That's a good point. When possible, you want to cut that log as soon as you can, or mill it as soon as you can after the log has been cut, just exactly for that reason. Especially with species like maple that have a really light color to them, and that's what people want. You start getting fungus moving in, discoloration, staining, and the value goes down in a hurry. So yeah.
Well, that's some good advice. Now back to stickering and stacking. Like any particular heights a guy should go to? Like, should he stack it to 3 feet or 4 feet? And then I know I see, and myself included, I'll fill up a 45-gallon drum or two and put it on top of them to try and keep everything sitting, still and not twisting. And
you have to weight it down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I've got an old Case International tractor. It can lift about 1,200 pounds, and so I make my stacks such a way that I can get the forks in and lift and move part of the stack at least, within the capabilities of the tractor. So if I need to move a stack, I can use the equipment to do that. But you want stickers. Well, let's say you're just cutting 1-inch material to 1.5 inches thick with the 4/4 to 6/4 boards. You're going to want those stickers no further than about 18 inches apart. So it takes more than what people think. Otherwise, what'll happen is the wood will kind of sag between the stickers, and that's no good. And everything has to stay straight and level. Again, if your pile has a twist to it and your board is dry that way, you're going to lose a lot of wood to warpage because they will take on that twist.
Yeah, they'll just shape to whatever they're sitting on, right? And you may not, but even halfway up that pile, it's still going to make that sag along the way. So as far as the sticker thickness goes, you're okay with either 3/4 or 1 inch, just as long as it's consistent all the way through the pile.
It's got to be consistent. Yeah. Typically, what I'll do when I'm cutting boards, what we call 9/4 or 1 1/8 inch thickness, because then when it dries, it's going to shrink a little bit. Then you're going to hit it with your surface planer and lose a little bit more. You can get, if you start out from the mill 1 1/8 inch, you can get consistent 3/4 inch to 7/8 inch thick finished kiln dried wood as the end result. So what I'll typically do is cut to that dimension, and then if I've got some boards that are just really low quality, I'll go ahead and put them on edgewise and slice up stickers from that so that they can, it's more valuable for that than it is for lumber.
Now, I've had different guys ask me this, and I don't know this answer, so I'm going to ask you. Does it matter what the species of the sticker is as opposed to what the board is? Should they be the same, or can you put a pine sticker on a oak board when you're piling it, or what's your thoughts on that?
The main thing is that the sticker is dry, or at least drier than the board. As long as you've got that, then you're not going to get staining. Right. A lot of people will tell you the same species as the board, and that probably is most critical, again, with something like maple or a very light colored wood that you don't want that stain. Obviously, with walnut, with that dark color, the stain isn't going to show up anyhow.
Right.
So, there's probably, I go along with that. The other thing is they need to be thick enough that you get good airflow through, because if you get moisture caught between the sticker and the wood that is supporting, then you can get fungus in there, and that's another source of discoloration that'll cut down the grade of your lumber.
Changes the value goes down.
Right.
That starts to occur. So I usually tell guys 1 inch. I think there's no reason. The quarter scale's there. It's just a nice number to work with, and it's easy to repeat it and just keep cutting them all at 1 inch, and then you don't ever have to worry about trying to match them up. You got a pile of stickers, and that's
yeah.
That's perfect. What else did I have to ask you about while I got you? Oh yeah, do you got any projects on the go yourself? Anything that you're working on? I know you said here you got a house project that's never.
This is the same house I was telling you about at the very first part of the interview. My son was in diapers at the time when I was building the house, and now my grandkids are in elementary school. Actually, my grandson is going to be in middle school this year, going into the 5th grade, and we still don't even have the floor done yet. I mean, there's still plywood subfloor. A lot of sheetrock hasn't been put up, and a lot that hasn't even been taped yet. So, I mean, that's from 1980. So you do the math on that. 40 years? Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
So anyway, that's part of the goal. As far as the sawmill goes, setting up a kiln. And that's something I've been wanting to do ever since I've been running the mill, and I just haven't gotten around to it yet.
Now,
But
are you thinking about buying one, or knowing you, I'm thinking you're probably going to build one.
actually, I've got a shipping container that's in place, and I had it modified. So it's got on the side, it's got 12-foot garage door on, so I can load it from the side, and I've got room for the dehumidifier and the other equipment. I've got a trailer that I've almost got finished. It'll put out close to 1,000 watts from solar. It's got the photovoltaics on it to run fans and the dehumidifier, so it'll pretty much be running during the day, and then at night the moisture will be equalizing out, and the heat itself for the kiln will be solar, just solar thermal. So that's a project that I'm working on, and
I will be interested in seeing that when you get there. That's I understand why it's taken a while, because that's not something that you can just throw everything at. There's a lot of thought involved. Where's it going to go? You got a great big heavy container. You know, how are you going to run? How are you going to get in and out of it? Like, there's a lot of planning to put one of those in place, and you got to have the room to do it. So
there's that, and you also got to think about what am I going to do when I get that wood out of the kiln, because you can't, you've got to have a place indoors that's got some kind of climate control. Otherwise, you're wasting your time putting it in the kiln in the first place. So you either have to have the market or to sell it, or else a way to store it.
Yeah, and that's excellent points. And see, I would have never carried it that far yet, but you're right. You got to think about it. So after you dry something like that in the kiln, if you just took it back out and put it, say, in an open-ended Quonset hut, you're just going to back up everything that you just tried to do.
Well, the first thing you're going to do when you take it out of the kiln is restack it without the stickers, so you don't get that airflow going through the pile. Okay. And if you get it down to moisture content and keep it out of the weather at least, and stack it so that the air can't go back through the pile and get the moisture back up again, you'll probably be all right. But you're better off if you can at least, like you talk about a Quonset, be able to have that closed off enough to have some, so you're not getting the really wide swings in humidity.
Some sort of controlled environment there that you can manage it.
But one other thing you were talking about stacking the lumber too is I always put I start out with low grade lumber on the bottom, then the best stuff, and then I'll have at least 4 layers of lower grade material on the top, and that's what I use to weight it down. So if it warps a little bit or moves, it's still holding the good stuff flat. And a lot of people, they'll put cement blocks up there, or they'll have concrete like highway barriers if they're lucky enough to have a forklift that'll get it up there and set them in place. Anything, or even strapping to keep tension, to keep them from the lumber from warping. You definitely want it. Especially during air drying. That's when the wood changes in. It's going to warp the most. That's where you really need that.
Yeah, and just to come back on a topic here, just to talk to you that you'd mentioned, you were talking about anchor seal.
Yeah.
And I've used it as well. Now, I've also talked to a lot of guys that tell me, if you've just got some latex paint, even that will make a big, big difference. What are your thoughts on that? Absolutely.
I mean, just get something. Either the latex is good. The disadvantage of the latex is it covers up the end of the log with the paint, so you can't see it, and you can't see the grain as well when you're making your cuts. And a lot of times, seeing that's going to help you know how to orient it. For example, if the center, the center of the growth rings is off center of the log, that's going to influence how you're going to cut it. And you really need to be able to see that for the best effect in cutting. So with the paint, you lose that. With the anchor seal, it dries clear enough that you can see underneath and you know what you're dealing with.
You can
And
still
the
see.
other thing is the anchor seal actually is being a wax when it's in the kiln. It'll actually it sublimates. It actually evaporates off the log, which is, you know, the latex, you're pretty well stuck with it.
Yeah, it's there until it's cut off or
Yeah.
what have you. That's interesting, and thanks for sharing that, because I learned something there as well. So one of the last questions I wanted to ask you here that we can, you know, maybe try and end on is, what advice can you give somebody who's just entering the market, who's gone, okay, we've got a piece of property, I've got an idea, I know I want to buy a sawmill. What advice can you give that guy? What would you tell him with your experience? What would you say? You need to check this. You need to make sure that. What would you suggest?
I think the first thing is, if at all possible, work with somebody that's got a mill. I mean, me, I'm always looking for free labor. So, and I have had people come and they'll spend a day or two working with me. And, you know, I let them run the mill a little bit. They do the stacking, off bearing, you know, the whole works, just so they can understand what the flow is and what's involved with that. But if you can spend a little bit of time doing that, that's helpful. Think about support equipment, because you say, okay, I got the mill. Oh, wait a minute, I don't have a chainsaw. I don't have a truck with a flatbed trailer. I don't have a way of hauling fork truck or any way to move the logs or the boards. I don't have. I got room for the sawmill, but I don't have room to a place cleared out, you know, to a drying yard for the lumber. So you got to kind of think it through, figure out what you need, what you don't have, and you never have enough chainsaws anyway. So that's a whole other story.
That's a true
My
story.
wife thinks I do, but I don't.
That's a true story. Now, what about size of the machine? Like, I talk to so many guys, and I feel like they underestimate what their needs are going to be. I'm going to be cutting 24-inch this, and they see that a machine's capable of cutting 24. But I mean, you and I both know that just because it's capable of that doesn't mean that's what you should be cutting on it all the time.
That's right. The old story: just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right.
And it is, even, you know, with the HD 36, and they say yes, you can get a 36-inch log with it. I've done it. I will tell you, it is a real wrestling match, and you've got to get that log on there just right in order to make it work. But it can be done. But really, anything above about 32 inches is, anything above 32 inches on that mill, though, isn't too bad, as long as you've got a way to handle the log. I mean, the mill can handle it. It's strong enough, you know, you can get around it. But if you've tried turning, you know, a 30-inch log, say 10 foot long, with a cant hook, you've spent a day's work doing it.
Absolutely, nail on the head there, because I think when this idea first comes to guys' minds or gals' minds, when they go, okay, I want to start cutting my own material, they haven't handled it enough, so they don't realize the weight of these things.
Yeah.
And how hard it is to manipulate and move them. So, you know, your advice about, if you can, find somebody with a machine and work with them for a day, the education you'd gain just in those couple of hours would be worth every penny. I try and tell guys when they're shopping and when they're looking, you know, go find the tree that you want to cut and wrap your arms around it and figure out how big it is. And then kind of do that to a few of them, so you get an average of, okay, most of these trees I want to cut are 20 inches or bigger, which is my favorite size to cut. Anything between 18 and 24 is by far my favorite shape.
Right. Yeah.
But you got to have equipment around to handle these things. You can't cut that log down and drag it out and then think, that you're going to be able to just get it up on the mill. You got to have that log loader system figured out one way or another, whether your tractor can lift it, or if it can't lift it, you got to have ramps and a winch. But that's all part of the process that guys, you know, you got to educate yourself on when you're first starting.
Yeah, just lifting it and then turning it, which, you know, that, again, with that winch system that Norwood has, that really works well. I've used that many times to get logs swung around where they need to be, and it does do the job. You just have to, you know, it takes time, especially when you're working by yourself. And
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, it has been a pleasure speaking with you. You are a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for being on From the Stump Television, sponsored by Norwood Sawmills. Everybody, if you have any questions, we're going to monitor the streams going forward on this. So if you have a question for Mr. Dave Boyt, please share it in the comments section below. I'd love to know where you're viewing from. So if you could drop a comment in there and even just tell us where you're at, it would be amazing. I'd like to see where everybody around the country might be watching this. This is on the rerun as well, not just on the live that we're doing right now. So please feel free, even if you're watching this after the fact, to go ahead, because we're still going to monitor those feeds. Dave, always a pleasure to speak with you, sir.
Thanks.
I look forward to talking to you again.
Okay. By the way, it's just on Norwood Connect. I am Post Okie is my handle, and look for me. I you know, get distracted and maybe, you know, not always get on it on a real regular basis, but I'll help out, and there are a lot of other people too. So it's a really good resource and a good way to get back in touch with me if you want to.
Perfect tip, guys. So again, Dave just put it out there on Norwood Connect. If you're an existing owner, that's a chat and a group that we have, so that you can get in there and get any of this information from these guys that have all the experience. So thanks, Dave, for putting that out there and letting everybody know you're alien.
Okay. All right. Hey, it's good talking with you, Trevor, and stay well. Be safe.
I hope we catch up with you soon. Stay safe, sir.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.